He thought she was just a stranded driver until she walked into his garage the next day, heels clicking, papers in hand, saying, "I bought the place." Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The morning sun hadn't risen yet, but the cold had already carved its presence into the windshield. Frost clung to every surface like a stubborn memory, and Caleb Reed's breath fogged up the inside of his old Chevy as he rolled down Main Street on his way to open the garage. The town of Briar Creek was barely awake, just the way he liked it. Fewer people, fewer questions. Just time, quiet, and the smell of oil waiting to greet him when he opened the shop door. Then he saw her. Parked half-crooked on the shoulder just past the edge of town was a sleek black sedan, too clean and too new to belong to anyone local. The hazard lights blinked like a metronome against the soft gray mist. And standing beside it, arms folded, was a woman in a tailored navy blazer, thick scarf tucked tightly under her chin, and high-heeled boots that clearly weren't built for rural gravel. She didn't wave, just looked at him as he slowed down. Not desperate, not demanding, just hoping. Caleb pulled over without thinking, habit maybe, or instinct, or that still small voice his mama once told him to listen to, the one that says, "Help her, no strings." He stepped out, boots crunching over thin layers of frost. "Battery?" he asked. The woman nodded. "Won't turn over. Tried twice. Thought the steering wheel was going to lock up on me." Her voice was smooth, practiced. She sounded like someone used to boardrooms and Bluetooth headsets, not jumpstart cables and roadside favors. He opened the back of his truck, grabbed the portable starter, and walked over without another word. She watched him closely, probably wondering if he was going to ask for money first. He didn't. The cables clamped, the hum of power surged. Caleb gave a nod. "Try it now." The engine clicked once, then roared to life. She blinked, caught off guard. That was fast. He smirked slightly. "Not my first rodeo." She extended her hand. "Thank you, I'm—" "Doesn't matter," he interrupted kindly. Stranded. Then he tipped his cap, walked back to his truck, and left her staring after him, car running, questions forming, and her name still caught behind her teeth. The car purred steadily behind her, engine humming like it hadn't just refused to wake up 15 minutes ago. The woman stood with her arms crossed, fingers tucked tight beneath the sleeves of her blazer, as if still thawing from the morning chill. Caleb leaned against his truck, waiting, not because he expected thanks, but because something in her posture said she wasn't done speaking. "I really appreciate it," she said finally, her breath visible in the cold. Her voice was softer now, less clipped, almost like she'd exhaled more than just air. "No problem," Caleb replied, nodding once. He dusted his palms on his jeans, the way he always did when a job was done, even if the job was a favor. She glanced back at the car, then at him. "Do you live around here?" "Just up the road," he said. "Got a shop in town, Carter's Garage." Her eyes flickered. "Carter's? Heard of it." She didn't say how or when. He smiled faintly. "We're hard to miss, mostly because we haven't changed since the 80s. She let out a short breath that could have been a laugh if it weren't cut off so quickly. Then she stepped forward slightly, almost as if something in her wanted to meet him halfway. "I didn't catch your name," he said casually, not pushing, just offering the moment like a handshake. There was a pause, just a second too long. Then she said, "Kate." Caleb raised an eyebrow, not because the name was strange, but because the delivery was too smooth, too ready. "Kate?" he repeated. "Just Kate?" She gave a quick smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's right." He nodded, pretending not to notice the crack in the surface. People had their reasons for guarding names. He'd met enough broken folks to know some truths don't travel well. "Well, just Kate," he said, stepping toward his truck. "If that battery acts up again, bring it by the garage. First jump's free. Second one costs a story." This time her smile came a little slower, a little warmer. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, stepping into her car. And just like that she drove off, leaving behind exhaust, a faint perfume of mystery, and a mechanic who already knew there was more to her than she wanted anyone to see. The garage still smelled like it always had: motor oil, old rubber, a hint of coffee grounds from the chipped mug Caleb kept forgetting to wash. The sun had finally broken through the haze, casting dusty golden light through the shop's warped windows. Caleb parked his truck out front, stepped out with a groan in his knees, and rolled his shoulders like he was shaking off the cold and whatever oddness lingered from that roadside encounter. Then he saw it, a plain white envelope, half tucked under the shop's front door, flapping gently in the wind like it knew it didn't belong. He crouched to pick it up, turning it over in his hands even though he already knew. There was no return address, just the name Caleb Reed, scrawled in dull ink, straight and impersonal. He opened it without ceremony, the way a man opens bad news after getting used to how it tastes. Inside was the final warning: one more missed payment and the property would be repossessed. Not reviewed, not reconsidered, repossessed. Carter's garage, his father's pride, his mother's second home, his own crutch and cross, was a month away from being someone else's forgotten building. Caleb didn't move, didn't blink, just let the paper hang in his hand as the words settled like a weight across his chest. He'd known things were bad, but not this bad. He walked inside, locking the door behind him out of habit. The lights flickered when he flipped the switch, one overhead bulb finally giving up with a soft pop. He tossed the envelope onto the front desk, where invoices piled up like unanswered prayers, then leaned over the counter, gripping the edge like it was the only thing still holding him upright. He remembered his dad standing right there, same posture, same grease-stained jeans, always saying, "If the town's still driving, we're still working." But people didn't pay with cash anymore. They paid with promises, with next week and when I get paid. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag even though they weren't dirty, glanced toward the office where his dad's old toolbox sat like a relic, and whispered, "I'm trying, Pop, but I don't know if it's enough." Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, the same car he'd fixed that morning faded into the traffic. And inside, Caleb stood alone in a place filled with memories, facing the one job he couldn't afford to lose, and the only one left he knew how to do. The bell above the garage door jingled softly as Mrs. Dobbin stepped inside, balancing a Tupperware container and a purse that looked older than the building itself. Caleb was under the hood of a rusting sedan, knuckles scraped, head ducked, but he still managed a greeting. "Mornin', Mrs. D," he called, voice muffled beneath the engine. She placed the container on the counter without a word and shuffled over to the coffee pot. "Figured you hadn't eaten anything real in a while? Peach cobbler? Not fresh, but close." Caleb looked up, grinning faintly. "You're spoiling me." She smiled back, though her eyes flicked briefly to the pile of unopened mail near the register. She didn't ask. Nobody ever did. That was the thing about Briar Creek. Folks here didn't confront pain head-on. They brought casseroles and acted like kindness wasn't charity. Everyone knew Carter's garage wasn't doing well. The gas station kids whispered. The grocery clerk had stopped asking Caleb if he wanted to put things on a tab because now everything was on a tab. But no one said the word trouble. They just showed up, like Marvin Ellis, who rolled in every Friday with a tractor that didn't need fixing. Just an excuse to hand Caleb a 20 for checking the rattle that only existed in Marvin's head. Or Lacey from the diner, who'd started bringing by leftover sandwiches at closing time, always saying, "Too much made again? Hate to toss it." Even the pastor had swung by last week, claiming his old van needed divine intervention. Caleb didn't ask for payment. The man left a crumpled 20 and a handwritten Bible verse on the dash. It was unspoken, this quiet loyalty. A patchwork of silent support, stitched together by people who pretended not to notice the peeling paint on the garage's outer walls, the light that hadn't been replaced in weeks, or the man inside who worked harder than anyone they knew just to stay afloat. Caleb never said thank you the way people expected. He'd just fix their car, tip his cap, and move on to the next job. And they never asked how he was holding up. Because in Briar Creek, love didn't always sound like concern. Sometimes it sounded like, "You've got time to look at my brakes?" Or, "I made too much cobbler again." And for now, that was enough. The next morning was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that made Caleb double-check the calendar, just in case the world had taken a day off without telling him. He was halfway through replacing a serpentine belt when the sound of footsteps crunched against the gravel outside the bay door, steady, unhurried, deliberate. He looked up and blinked. It was her, Kate. Only not the Kate from the day before. This Kate wasn't dressed for a board meeting or a showroom. She wore jeans, a faded hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and instead of a designer bag, she held a clipboard tucked under one arm and a takeaway coffee in the other. She looked like someone who belonged. And that's what threw him. "You again," Caleb said, wiping his hands on a shop rag, eyes narrowing. Not with unkindness, but curiosity. Kate smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd come back? I figured you had a private driver waiting somewhere." She smirked. "Not today." She stepped closer, letting her eyes scan the garage, not in awe, not in judgment, but like she was making notes in her mind. Caleb noticed it immediately. People who were just passing through didn't look at a place like that. They didn't study shelves or glance at electrical outlets or count overhead lights. She was assessing. "You need something?" he asked, motioning to the clipboard. "Just a few questions," she said. "About how many cars you take in a week, overhead, inventory turnover, engine rebuilds, cost of equipment upgrades, that sort of thing." Caleb stared. "You buying stock in spark plugs?" Kate tilted her head. "Just curious. People aren't usually curious about my rent breakdown unless they're about to raise it." Her smile was too careful. Or help pay it. That caught him. He didn't say anything, but something shifted in his posture, like he'd just heard thunder on a cloudless day. Kate looked around again, this time slower. "Mind if I take a look around?" Caleb hesitated, then stepped aside. "It's your clipboard." She nodded once and wandered toward the back of the shop, quietly absorbing everything. The scuffed floors, the grease-stained walls, the fading photo of Caleb's father pinned to the office door. And as she moved through the space, clipboard scribbling, Caleb stood frozen in the middle of his own garage, suddenly unsure of whether he was being inspected or rescued. The wind picked up that afternoon, rattling the loose sheet metal near the garage's back door. Caleb leaned over the workbench, tuning a carburetor by feel, muscle memory guiding him while his mind stayed stuck on the woman pacing around his shop with a clipboard and questions that didn't belong to a customer. He didn't hear her return to the counter until she cleared her throat. A folder now in place of the clipboard. "Thought you might want to see this," she said, voice even. Caleb straightened, wiping his hands slowly, and took the folder without a word. He opened it with the kind of wariness usually reserved for bad news, and found exactly that. At the top of the page was the name of the holding company he'd seen stamped on the foreclosure notice. Ashwood Capital. He knew the name the way a man knows the shadow of a boot before it lands. He flipped through legal jargon, payment history, interest clauses, until his eyes landed on a short paragraph highlighted in yellow. Assignment of lien, transfer of debt, and then her name, signed and dated. Kate Harper. Caleb's mouth went dry. "You bought it?" he asked, voice low. Kate met his stare. "Yes." "You—" He laughed, but it wasn't amused. "So you just—" "What? Saw a guy jump your car and thought it'd be cute to buy his debt?" She winced, not at his tone, but at the truth in it. "I didn't plan it like that." He closed the folder slowly, jaw tight. "You could have just told me yesterday, when you were asking about rebuilds like you were writing a thesis." "I wanted to see it for myself first," she said quietly. "The garage. You. what this place is before I made any decisions." Caleb crossed his arms. "Decisions like what? Shutting us down?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "No, like saving it." That caught him. She stepped closer, not aggressive, just honest. "My father bought up a bunch of distressed properties in small towns like this before he passed. This one was part of it. I inherited his portfolio last year. Most of it I sold off." "And this one?" Caleb asked. "I kept it," she said. "I don't know why. Maybe because this place doesn't feel like a building. It feels like a story, worth continuing." Caleb looked down at the folder again, then back at the woman standing in his garage. Not a stranger anymore, not a customer, not someone passing through. Just Kate Harper, daughter of the man who held his future in paperwork, and the woman now holding the pen. The folder was still sitting on the workbench when Kate slid a second envelope across it, this one slimmer, cleaner, fresh ink and the scent of crisp decisions clinging to its edges. Caleb stared at it like it might explode. "It's a contract," she said, calm but not cold. "Not a trap, not a trick." Caleb didn't touch it. "You're offering me a job at the place I already work. I'm offering you a future, one where Carter's garage doesn't get boarded up." He scoffed. "And in exchange?" She folded her arms. "I take ownership, full oversight. You stay on as head mechanic, run the floor, make all repair decisions. I handle the business side, rent, licensing, insurance, expansion. No more sleepless nights trying to juggle invoices and spark plugs." He exhaled hard, jaw working. "So I hand over the keys." "You keep the keys," she said quickly. "But yes, I hold the title. Legally, I already do." It hit him harder than it should have. Caleb looked around the garage, the chipped walls, the photos, the stained cement floor that had caught his father's boots and his own since boyhood. Everything in this place carried weight, history, sweat, legacy. "You just want to own it?" he asked, quieter now. "What for?" Kate met his eyes. "Because I don't want to see it disappear, and because maybe I need to build something real for once." The words settled between them like dust in sunlight. Quiet, uncertain, honest. Caleb opened the envelope. Pages, terms, a salary that was more than he'd ever drawn, a line at the bottom that read, "Operations Partner, Caleb Reed." He stared at the pen on the table, then at Kate, standing there, not smug, not pleading, just there. He could slam the door, walk away, let pride bury what little was left, but instead, he picked up the pen. His hand didn't shake, but his heart did. One signature, one breath. And just like that, Caleb Reed was no longer the owner of Carter's garage. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. The garage had never needed a second clock. The old one, above the parts shelf, was enough. Yellowed plastic, a crack through the face, and hands that sometimes lagged 5 minutes behind. But it was Caleb's. He read it like muscle memory. 8:10 meant time to roll up the bay doors. Noon meant Earl Jenkins would wander in complaining about his muffler. It wasn't just a clock. It was the heartbeat of the shop. Kate didn't say anything the morning she brought in her own, just arrived with a sleek black digital display tucked under her arm, a Bluetooth speaker in her tote, and a tablet that clicked like a metronome against her leg as she walked. She mounted her clock near the office door, centered, polished, precise. It glowed silently, counting minutes like they were money. Caleb noticed it the moment he walked in. "That's supposed to tell me when my lunch break is?" he asked, a rag slung over his shoulder. Kate didn't look up from her screen. "It's supposed to help us stay on schedule." "I already have a schedule." She glanced at the ancient clock ticking above the shop radio. "One that doesn't believe in accuracy?" He smirked. "It's got charm." She didn't argue, but she didn't take hers down either. From that moment on, time in the garage split in two. Caleb worked to the rhythm of bolts and engines, letting the day unfold like it always had, based on the noise a car made, or the way light fell through the garage door. Kate moved in blocks and alarms, color-coded charts, and calendar invites. She scheduled lunch meetings he never showed up for. He stayed late fixing a generator she didn't even know was broken. They tripped over each other constantly, Kate asking for quarterly numbers while Caleb was elbow-deep in carburetor grease. Caleb muttering about her organizing the soul out of the place while she tried to streamline customer intake. Still, she showed up every morning, coffee in hand, notes prepared. And he unlocked the door without fail, radio playing, tools laid out like soldiers ready for battle. 2 clocks, 2 worlds, neither one ticking quite the same, but neither one willing to leave. The sign still said Carter's Garage, but the town no longer treated it like a given. Now it was a conversation, a debate, a question whispered across diner booths and grocery aisles. You been by the shop since she took over? Caleb still running things, or is it all barcodes and spreadsheets now? Half of Briar Creek showed up out of loyalty. Old-timers, former classmates, folks who remembered Caleb's father patching their brake lines for a handshake and a slice of pie. They'd walk in nodding at Caleb, offering sideways glances at Kate as if she were a city inspector with a clipboard and no soul. They still paid in cash, refused receipts, and left with a muttered, "Don't let her change too much." The other half were newer faces, young couples from the subdivision on the East End, tech-savvy small business owners, the real estate agent with the Bluetooth in her ear. They walked in excited about the digital check-in system Kate had installed, impressed with the fresh coffee station in the waiting room, relieved they could finally book an appointment online. "It's about time this place got a facelift," they'd say, loud enough for someone to overhear. And in the middle of it all stood Caleb, jaw tight, heart loyal, grease on his hands, fixing transmissions while trying not to overhear the growing hum of opinions around him. Kate didn't flinch under the weight of it, but she felt it. The town didn't welcome change easily, and she was change with a capital C. She tried to stay out of the way when it mattered. Let Caleb speak the language of the regulars. Let him handle the old trucks with names like Betsy and the Beast. But every improvement she made, no matter how small, new signage, updated tools, better lighting, was met with raised eyebrows and side comments. Still, the cars kept coming. People argued about the garage, but they showed up. They always did. Because when engines sputtered and wheels locked, ideology took a backseat to trust. And, like it or not, Carter's Garage was still the place people trusted, even if they weren't quite sure who they were trusting anymore. The garage was quieter at night. The echo of clinking tools faded into the hum of a space heater and the low static of an old radio Caleb barely noticed anymore. Most of the town had gone home hours ago, but he was still there, under the lift, tightening bolts on a suspension job that couldn't wait till morning. His sweatshirt was soaked through at the collar, and the ache in his back told him he'd been bent over too long. He heard the footsteps before he saw her. Kate didn't knock. She never did anymore. She just slipped inside like she belonged, the cold air curling in behind her as she stepped onto the concrete floor. No clipboard this time, no questions. Just 2 paper cups in her hands, steam curling gently into the fluorescent light. Caleb didn't look up right away. He finished tightening the bolt, wiped his hands on his jeans, and turned toward her. "You still here?" he asked, not unkindly. She shrugged. "So are you." She walked over, set 1 cup down on the bench beside his tool tray, then kept the other for herself. The logo on the side was from Lana's Diner. Open late, strong coffee, no nonsense. The same place his dad used to swear brewed the best cup in 3 counties. Kate didn't explain, didn't offer some business reason for the gesture. Just took a slow sip and leaned against the opposite workbench, looking up at the old license plates nailed along the walls. Caleb stared at the cup for a moment, then, without saying a word, picked it up and took a sip. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was a shared one. the kind that settles between two people who've fought their corners, worn down their edges, and finally stepped into the middle. Kate set her cup down gently. The heater in my apartment clicks like a metronome. Couldn't sleep. Caleb nodded once. Figured as much. No thank yous, no apologies, just the sound of tools cooling on metal and two people breathing in the same space, neither trying to win, just trying to stay. And in that quiet, something softened, not enough to name, but enough to matter. It started with a joke. Kate stood near the tool bench, arms crossed, watching Caleb disassemble the carburetor from an old '87 Bronco like it was second nature. She tilted her head, brow raised. "You make it look easy," she said, half teasing. Caleb glanced up, the corner of his mouth tugging. "It's not magic, just metal and patience." She shrugged. "Then teach me." He blinked. "You serious?" She nodded, stepping closer. "Unless you're afraid I'll show you up." He handed her a wrench without another word. For the next hour, the garage filled with the sounds of clanking metal, muffled curses, and the occasional burst of laughter as Kate tried, and failed, to navigate the delicate insides of the carburetor. Her manicure, long forgotten, chipped away with every twist. Grease streaked across her hoodie, and by the third dropped screw, she was biting her lower lip like it might help steady her hands. "This part hates me," she muttered, frowning at a stubborn jet valve. Caleb leaned beside her, guiding her fingers gently. "It's not about force. It's about feel. Machines don't respond to brute strength. They respond to attention." She looked sideways at him. "Is that your philosophy for everything?" He didn't answer, just watched as she slowly, carefully, slid the valve into place. When it finally clicked, her face lit up. "That's it?" "That's it," he said. She exhaled, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. "You make this look so damn graceful." "That's because I've been doing it since I was 12. Kate wiped her hands on a towel, leaving dark smears. "I've never fixed anything," she admitted. "Not a toaster, not a table, definitely not a car." Caleb looked at her for a long beat. First time for everything. She smiled then, not the polished kind, not the PR-trained kind, but the kind that reached all the way up to her eyes and crinkled the corners. There, surrounded by bolts, grease, and the smell of fuel, she didn't look like the woman with contracts and control. She looked like someone discovering she could make something work, with the right teacher and a little patience. And for once, Caleb didn't mind being the one she asked. The rain came in light and steady, tapping against the garage's windows like a rhythm no one asked for. It was the kind of afternoon that made everything feel a little softer, a little slower. Caleb was under the hood of a Buick that hadn't run right in 2 years, humming quietly to a tune that only existed in his memory. Kate sat in the office, door cracked open, tablet on her lap, phone pressed to her ear. He wasn't trying to listen. He never did. But the moment her voice dropped, his hands paused. "Yes, I saw the offer," she said. Her tone was calm, but edged with something else. Fatigue, maybe. Or frustration. "No, it's not the money. It's just not the right fit." There was a long silence. Caleb leaned over the engine, pretending to be busy with a ratchet that didn't need turning. "I'm not coming back to New York," she said finally. "Tell them to stop sending flowers." He heard the faint click of her ending the call, then silence. Kate didn't come out right away. When she finally did, she was holding a clipboard again, every inch of her posture composed. But her eyes lingered on the Buick a little longer than usual. Caleb didn't say a word, didn't ask, just tightened a bolt and muttered, "Looks like rain's gonna stick around a while." She nodded like that was all they needed to talk about. Later, she brought him coffee. No explanation. Just a paper cup slid across the workbench, steam curling between them. Caleb took it without looking up, the silence between them comfortable and full of the things they didn't say. He didn't ask about New York. She didn't mention the job. But both of them knew. She could have left, Could have taken the office with the skyline view and the penthouse perks and all the things people like her were supposed to chase. But instead she stayed. In a garage with leaky windows, humming engines, and a man who noticed everything and said nothing at all. It started on a Tuesday. A folding table appeared out front, wobbling slightly on the cracked pavement, with a crooked cardboard sign that read, "Lemonade, 50cc." Behind it stood a boy no older than 8, baseball cap too big, elbows on the table like he'd been running a stand his whole life. Caleb spotted him first. He was hauling out the trash when he saw the kid wave at a passing car, grinning like a salesman who believed in his product with everything he had. "Bold spot for a stand," Caleb muttered. The boy shrugged. "Garage gets good foot traffic." Caleb chuckled. "Guess you've done your research." A few minutes later, Kate stepped outside, pausing when she saw the stand. She had her tablet under one arm, coffee in the other, and that look on her face, the one she wore when she was trying to understand something that wasn't in her spreadsheet. "Hey there," she said, walking over. "How's business?" "Slow," the kid admitted. "People keep saying it's too cold for lemonade." She smiled. "Then they've clearly never had a good cup." He handed her one in a styrofoam cup with a hand-drawn smiley face. She dropped a $5 bill into his tin can and walked off, sipping it like it was made from gold. No big speech, no small talk, just the sound of her heels tapping back into the garage. The next day, same routine, another cup, another 5. By the end of the week, the kid had added an extra line to his sign, "Preferred by executives." Caleb watched it all quietly. He never said anything when Kate came back from the stand, always sipping, always smiling faintly. But he noticed. He noticed that she never asked for change, that she never corrected the kid's spelling when he handed her hand-drawn loyalty cards, that she lingered just long enough each time to hear how many cups he'd sold. "You always overpay," he said one afternoon as she set the cup down next to his wrench tray. Kate glanced at him. "Maybe I'm investing." "In what?" She took a slow sip and looked out the window, where the boy was counting coins with a grin too big for his face. "In someone who shows up." Caleb didn't say anything after that. He just poured the last of her lemonade into his empty coffee cup and kept working. The engine sat like a brick in the middle of Bay 2, silent, defiant, and very much not doing what it was supposed to do. Caleb had already taken it apart twice, adjusted the timing, rewired the ignition system, and cursed in 5 different emotional tones. Still, every time he turned the key, the result was the same: nothing. Kate leaned against the edge of the workbench, sleeves rolled up, grease smudged along her forearm. She wasn't offering suggestions anymore. She'd learned when to stop, but she hadn't left either. Somewhere between the 3rd failed attempt and the 4th sigh, she'd grabbed a shop towel and joined in, handing tools without being asked. Outside, the town was asleep. The only lights came from inside the garage and the flickering "open" sign they forgot to switch off. A radio hummed low in the background, old blues, something raw and slow, and the air smelled like sweat, metal, and frustration. "I think this thing hates us," Kate finally said, wiping a streak of grime from her cheek. Caleb shot her a tired glance. "Hate's a strong word. I'd say it's just deeply unimpressed." They both laughed, quiet, worn out, real. He handed her a socket wrench, and their fingers brushed. Not on purpose, not a moment drawn out like a movie, just a pause. Warmth, grease meeting skin, and a flicker of something unspoken between two people too tired to pretend anymore. She didn't pull her hand back, neither did he. "You could have gone home hours ago," Caleb said, crouching beside the engine again. "Could have," she agreed. He looked up. "Why didn't you?" Kate shrugged. "Felt like I should be here." The honesty of it landed between them. Not romantic, not dramatic, just true. The final attempt came just after midnight. Caleb turned the key with a prayer disguised as a grunt, and this time the engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life like it had only been playing dead out of spite. Kate let out a breathless laugh, and Caleb leaned back against the truck, shoulders sagging with relief. They didn't celebrate, didn't hug, just stood there, covered in grease, side by side, watching the engine run. And in that midnight hum, beneath flickering lights and tired silence, something between them finally began to turn over too. The sun wasn't fully up yet, but the garage lights already glowed against the pale morning haze. Caleb had just lifted the bay doors, breath clouding in the crisp air, when he heard footsteps on gravel and the unmistakable crinkle of a paper bag. He turned, half expecting a customer with an early complaint. Instead, it was Kate, bundled in a flannel jacket over her usual hoodie, balancing a cardboard tray of coffee and a pink box that looked suspiciously like it came from Rosie's bakery 2 blocks down. "You're early," Caleb said, raising an eyebrow. "Thought I'd beat the grease," she replied, handing him a steaming cup. And the sarcasm. He took the coffee with a nod, eyeing the box as she popped it open on the tool bench. Glazed, chocolate, jelly-filled, and 2 of those maple bars he always pretended not to love. "What's the occasion, he asked, grabbing one and breaking off a corner. Kate smirked. "Thought maybe if I fed the crew, they'd stop grumbling about me rearranging the parts inventory." Caleb took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then pointed at her with the half-eaten maple bar. "Getting soft?" She leaned against the workbench, sipping her coffee. "Just getting smart." He chuckled, the kind of quiet laugh that came from a place without defenses. "You know, Rosie doesn't bake those till 8. How'd you get them early?" Kate looked pleased with herself. "Turns out if you buy coffee there every morning for 3 weeks and tip big, she starts slipping you the good stuff out the back." Caleb shook his head, smiling in spite of himself. "You're dangerous when you get resourceful." "Only when I'm highly motivated," she said, eyes twinkling over her cup. They stood there for a moment, watching the steam curl off their drinks, the garage slowly waking behind them. No meetings, no tension, just the smell of sugar, caffeine, and motor oil in the morning air. And though neither of them said it, the donuts were more than a peace offering. They were proof she was still here, still trying, and that somehow meant more than either one was willing to admit. The day started like any other. Wrenches clanking, engines humming, the hiss of compressed air cutting through the morning quiet. Caleb was under the hood of a Dodge pickup, sleeves rolled up, smudges of oil across his forearms. Kate hovered nearby, tablet in hand, scrolling through inventory back orders with her usual focus. He didn't even realize he'd said it until it was already out of his mouth. "Kate, can you grab me that torque wrench?" She froze mid-scroll. Not boss, not ma'am, just Kate. It was simple, casual, but it landed differently than any title she'd worn since she walked into that garage. She glanced at him, eyes narrowing slightly, not in irritation, but like she was trying to replay the moment in her head. Confirm he'd really said it. He didn't look up, just kept working, waiting for the tool like he'd said it that way 100 times before. She set down her tablet, picked up the wrench, and walked it over without a word. But when she handed it to him, her fingers lingered just a second longer than necessary. "Here you go," she said softly. "Thanks," he replied, still focused on the bolts, still pretending like it wasn't a shift. But it was. She could feel it. That name, her name, spoken not like a title, not like an obligation, but like something familiar, something earned. For weeks, she'd been ma'am when he was annoyed, boss when he was humoring her. Both said with just enough grit to remind her that she hadn't been invited into this world. She'd bought her way in. But Kate was different. It didn't draw a line between them, it crossed one. She returned to her spot by the office, sat down slowly, and tried to focus on the numbers. But the page kept blurring. Her mind kept circling back to the sound of her name in his voice. Plain, honest, uncomplicated, and somewhere deep in her chest, something warm settled in. A quiet sort of joy she didn't quite know what to do with yet. But she knew one thing. She liked the way it sounded more than she'd ever admit. The flyer sat on the workbench for 3 days. Bright red lettering, smudged from grease-stained fingers. Briar Creek Community Cookout. Saturday at 5. All welcome. Someone had left it on the front counter, probably Lacey from the diner, who never missed a chance to feed a crowd. Caleb hadn't mentioned it to Kate. Neither had anyone else. Kate saw it anyway, saw how the other customers chatted about it while she passed by, saw the way conversations quieted when she entered a room. She figured the invitation extended to everyone but her. Saturday afternoon came, and she was still in the office. Dressed down, yes, but not planning to go. She told herself she had reports to finish. In truth, she didn't want to show up and find out she'd been right, that she didn't belong. Then the knock came, a slow, polite tap on the frame of the open door. Caleb stood there, leaning against it like he wasn't asking for anything. "You ready?" he asked. Kate blinked. "For what?" He tilted his head toward the lot. "Cookout, you're coming." She hesitated. "I wasn't planning on it." "You are now." She didn't argue, not really. Just stared at him for a second, heart oddly louder than it should have been. Caleb's truck was an old Chevy with a dented passenger door and a dash that smelled faintly of motor oil and mint gum. As she climbed in, her knee brushed the worn-out upholstery and her hand gripped the handle that didn't fully latch. He didn't apologize for the mess. She didn't expect him to. They drove mostly in silence. Windows down, country music low, fields on either side golden and waving like a welcome mat. When they pulled up to the park, the place was already buzzing. Kids chasing each other, grill smoke curling into the air, laughter rising like it belonged to another time. People turned when they saw Caleb. Then they saw her. For a heartbeat, Kate almost opened the door to climb right back into safety. But then Caleb said, "They just need a minute, and maybe a plate of ribs." And when he offered his hand, grease still under his nails, she took it. That night, Briar Creek saw her differently, not as the outsider, not as the woman with the clipboard, but as the one who showed up anyway, and maybe that was all it took. The barbecue had settled into that golden hour lull, the grills cooling, kids sticky with lemonade and dust, the chatter mellowed into low hums. Someone had dragged out a beat-up speaker and set it on a picnic table near the edge of the field. It crackled at first, then eased into a slow country song with a steel guitar that sounded like memory itself. Kate was nursing a sweet tea, sitting on the edge of a picnic bench, watching fireflies blink into existence. Her boots tapped lightly against the grass, just enough rhythm to betray the fact that she recognized the tune. She didn't peg Caleb as the type to notice music like that. She didn't expect what happened next. He walked over slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes soft in the fading light. He didn't say anything, just held out his hand, rough, familiar, waiting. She looked at it, then up at him. "You serious?" she asked, a breath of laughter behind her words. He shrugged. "Music's playing. Seems rude not to." It wasn't a grand gesture, no spotlight, no crowd watching, just a quiet moment, an old song, and two people standing at the edge of a community cookout where no one really danced anymore. But they did. Kate took his hand. Caleb pulled her gently into the open grass, where the dirt gave way to rhythm and the breeze carried hints of charcoal and wildflowers. He led without leading, his movements easy, natural, like the two of them had done this before in some other life. She stepped on his foot once, laughed. He didn't flinch. "I haven't danced in years," she murmured. "Neither have I," he replied. Still they moved. No one interrupted, no one teased. A few heads turned, sure, but most just smiled and let the moment exist. Kate didn't think about business plans or contracts. Caleb didn't think about overdue bills or carburetors. They just let the music guide them, let the fireflies light the field, let something quiet and unspoken settle between them. When the song ended, neither one stepped back right away. And maybe they didn't need to. The light snapped off without warning. 1 second, the garage hummed with its usual buzz. the overhead fluorescents flickering like tired stars, the low thrum of a socket wrench in Caleb's hand. The next, silence, darkness, a beat of stillness, followed by a faint click as the radio died mid-song. Kate stood in the office doorway, blinking at the sudden blackout. Did we blow a fuse? Caleb looked up from under the hood, flashlight already in hand. Nope. Town grid's out. Probably the transformer on Mill Street again. Happens every time the wind gets bored. Outside, the clouds had rolled in thick and fast, stretching over Briar Creek like a wool blanket. Rain hadn't come yet, but the air buzzed like it was holding its breath. Well, Kate said, tugging her sleeves down, guess we're done for the day. Caleb smirked. Not quite. 15 minutes later, the two of them sat cross-legged on the floor in the break room, lit by the soft beam of two flashlights propped in empty coffee mugs. Between them sat two steaming styrofoam cups of instant noodles, one beef, one chicken, the kind you only ate when nothing else was working and everything else was too quiet. Kate twirled noodles with a plastic fork. This is probably the least professional dinner I've had in a decade. Caleb raised his cup in a mock toast. Welcome to our 5-star dining experience. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sound the soft crackle of an old battery-powered radio Caleb had pulled from a drawer. It played a blues station that faded in and out with the storm's mood. Used to eat these all the time in college, Kate said, swirling her fork. Couldn't cook, wouldn't cook, but I had ambitions and deadlines, and ramen was faster than failure. Caleb nodded, his smile faint. We used to split one pack between 3 brothers, always saved the seasoning packet for last. Called it the gold dust. She laughed, and it was different this time, looser, less guarded. You're not what I expected, she admitted. He glanced over, eyes catching hers in the soft glow. You either. The power didn't come back that night, but neither of them left early. Sometimes the dark makes it easier to see. It was early. Too early for the radio, too early for customers, and definitely too early for the tension that settled in Caleb's chest when he spotted the folder on Kate's desk. He wasn't snooping, at least that's what he told himself. The office door was open, the morning sunlight creeping across the concrete floor like an invitation. He had come in looking for the order forms. That was all. But then his eyes caught the bold letters stamped across the top of a plain manila folder. Carter's Garage, redevelopment plans. The words hit like a punch to the ribs. He stared at them longer than he should have, heart slowing into something heavier. Redevelopment. That was the kind of word people used before they tore something down and put up a strip mall, or a wellness spa, or whatever progress looked like in an investor's eyes. He didn't open it, just stood there, one foot still in the hallway, one hand curled tight around the doorframe. Behind him, the creak of boots broke the silence. Kate. She didn't say anything at first, just looked from his face to the folder and back again, not angry, not defensive, just caught. Caleb took a breath. You planning on telling me, or just waiting until the demolition crew rolled in? Kate stepped forward, slow and calm, and reached for the folder. For a second he thought she might hide it, tuck it away, wave it off, but instead she opened it. Flipping it toward him, she laid out the contents like cards on a table, drawings, photos, notes scribbled in the margins. There was no corporate logo, no sketches of a new parking lot, no wrecking ball plans, just a vision, refinished signage with the original name preserved, upgraded wiring, solar panels on the roof, a new break room that wasn't duct-taped together, and right in the center of the draft, head mechanic's office. C. Reed. I wasn't hiding it, she said softly. I was waiting until I could show you the whole picture. Caleb looked up at her, the weight still in his chest, but shifting now, softer. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. You kept the name, he muttered. Kate nodded. Because it still matters. And suddenly the folder didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Caleb sat down in the worn office chair, the one with the squeaky wheel and stuffing poking through the armrest. The folder lay open on the desk between them, Its contents spread like a confession. Kate stood nearby, arms loosely crossed, not defending herself, just waiting. Waiting for him to see what she'd seen all along. The first sketch was simple. An updated front entrance with new siding, but the same crooked overhang that Caleb's dad had patched a dozen times. Next page, equipment upgrades, new lifts, better lighting. Then the one that stopped him cold. A hand-drawn sign mock-up, Carter's Garage, built on grit, running on heart. Beneath it, in thick red pen, circled twice, preserve the name, honor the legacy. Caleb stared at the words, his jaw tight. Something inside him began to shift, like gears catching after too many years grinding out of sync. "This wasn't what I thought it was," he said quietly. Kate nodded. "I know. I thought you were planning to flip it, tear it down, replace it with something shinier." "I could have," she said. "A dozen investors told me I should." He looked up. "Why didn't you?" She met his eyes, steady and sure. "Because this place means something, not just to you, to this town, to me too, now." Caleb sat back, letting the pages wash over him. There were notes scribbled in the margins, questions about storage, possibilities for a community training program, even ideas for a customer loyalty wall. And in the corner of one page, written so small he almost missed it, "Let Caleb lead the rebuild. He knows the heart of this place." He swallowed hard. All this time he'd been guarding the past, thinking she was there to erase it, but she hadn't come to replace the story. She'd come to help write the next chapter. When he finally spoke again, his voice was low. "You really think this can work?" Kate smiled, not the polished one she wore at meetings, but the kind that cracked through when something mattered. "I don't just think. I believe." And for the first time in weeks, Caleb believed it too. The garage was unusually quiet that afternoon, the kind of silence that made time stretch. Caleb was under the hood of an old station wagon, elbow deep in a mess of rusted bolts and stubborn wires, when Kate wandered over. No clipboard, no coffee, just her sleeves rolled up and her expression unreadable. "You need an extra set of hands?" she asked, voice soft. Caleb stepped aside, handing her a light. "Hold this steady." She nodded and leaned in beside him, the beam landing just where it needed to. For a while they worked like that, quiet, focused, comfortable in the rhythm of movement. Then she spoke. "My dad had a garage once," she said suddenly. No lead-in, no warning, just words falling like they'd waited years to be said. Caleb didn't stop working, just nodded slightly, letting her keep going if she wanted to. It was before the money, before everything. A tiny place outside Raleigh. He used to come home with grease on his fingers, dirt in his boots, but this look in his eyes like it mattered. Her voice thinned, cracked in a place she didn't try to hide. But he couldn't hold on to it. Bad timing, bad economy, maybe bad pride. I was 12 when it closed. We left town 2 weeks later. He never talked about it again. Caleb didn't interrupt. He just reached behind him, grabbed a wrench, and held it out to her. Kate blinked at it, then took it in both hands, running her fingers over the smooth steel like it grounded her. "I think he carried that failure for the rest of his life," she continued. "I never saw him build anything with his hands after that. Only companies. Only deals." She paused, eyes fixed on the engine. "Maybe that's why I didn't sell this place. Maybe I needed to finish something he couldn't." The wrench stayed still in her grip, but her breathing slowed. Caleb didn't offer sympathy or wisdom. He just tightened a bolt and let the silence settle around them, gentle and warm. Sometimes the best thing you can say is nothing at all. Just hand someone a tool and let them remember who they're trying to be. It happened fast. One minute, Mr. Landry was leaning against the hood of his truck, chatting with Caleb about brakes and weather. The next, he was on the ground, clutching his chest, eyes wide with panic. The wrench Caleb had been holding clattered to the floor. Time froze for a split second, just long enough for bystanders to panic, for Caleb's brain to stall. And then Kate ran. She was out of the office before anyone else could move, phone in one hand, emergency kit in the other. No hesitation, no instructions needed. She dropped to her knees beside Mr. Landry and took command of the moment like she'd been doing it her whole life. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, checking his pulse, already pressing 2 aspirin into his palm and guiding him to chew. Caleb stood a few steps back, stunned into stillness, watching as the woman he thought he'd figured out revealed another page entirely. "Someone call 911, she said without looking up. "Tell them possible cardiac symptoms. He's conscious, breathing, and stable for now." She spoke with calm precision, not the kind that demands control, but the kind that offers it, like her steadiness could hold back the fear cracking in the air. By the time the ambulance arrived, Kate had Mr. Landry's head propped on her jacket and a list of his medications written out in clean block letters on a scrap of receipt paper. The EMTs took over. Mr. Landry gave a weak smile as they loaded him up, squeezing her hand before they closed the doors. Only then did Kate stand. Her hands were shaking just slightly. She wiped them on her jeans like it was just another grease stain, but her eyes darted around the small crowd that had gathered. And they were looking at her, really looking. Lacey from the diner mouthed, "Thank you." Marvin Ellis tipped his cap. Even gruff old Earl gave a stiff nod before climbing into his truck. No one said outsider. No one said boss. They just saw her for who she was, for what she'd done. And as Caleb stood beside her in the settling dust, he realized something had shifted. Kate hadn't just stepped into Briar Creek. She'd earned her place in it. The first rumble of thunder rolled in around 6, low and slow, like it was clearing its throat. By the time Caleb finished replacing the rear axle on the Ford Ranger, the sky had turned the color of old bruises. He stepped out to pull the bay doors down just as the rain hit, fast, heavy, relentless. Kate appeared beside him, arms crossed, watching the water curtain off the roof and splash into the puddles that formed almost instantly in the gravel lot. "Well," she said, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek, "guess we're not going anywhere." Caleb nodded. "Looks like it's just us and the oil stains tonight." They made their way to the shop floor, lit now only by the office lamp casting a warm, yellow glow. The hum of the storm was everywhere, on the roof, in the walls, in the silence that filled the space between words. Kate held up a brown paper bag. "I ordered Thai." Delivery guy nearly floated in. They sat on the floor, legs stretched out, backs against the toolbox wall. The smell of ginger and curry drifted through the garage, oddly comforting in a place usually dominated by the scent of rubber and metal. They ate in easy quiet, trading bites, poking fun at the takeout fortune cookies, watching the water race down the windows like it had somewhere to be. "You ever think about leaving?" Kate asked suddenly, her voice soft beneath the rain. Caleb chewed, then swallowed. "Sometimes. Then I think about who'd fix Lacey's radiator or Marvin's tractor." She smiled. "That's very on brand." He glanced over to, "You?" "All the time," she said. Then something small happens. A cup of lemonade, a thank you I didn't expect, and I stay another day. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was full. Full of unspoken things, past regrets, future maybes. The strange comfort of being exactly where neither of them expected to be. Outside, lightning streaked the sky. Inside, 2 people sat side by side on a stained garage floor, bellies warm, hearts uncertain, and time slowed just enough to let the rain say all the things they weren't ready to, and neither one reached for the door. The rain had quieted to a soft whisper, a rhythmic tapping on the tin roof that made the world outside feel miles away. The storm had lost its teeth, leaving only mist and puddles and the occasional gust of wind rattling the garage door. Caleb stood near the breaker box, flashlight in hand, trying to coax the power back on. Kate hovered nearby, arms folded, watching him with that half smile she only wore when she wasn't trying to impress anyone. "No offense," she said, "but your electrical system looks like it was installed during the Cold War." Caleb chuckled, flipping a switch that did absolutely nothing. None taken. It probably was. He turned to hand her the flashlight, beam angled toward the floor. She reached out for it, but her fingers met his instead. Warm, steady, familiar. After all the grease and thunderstorms and take-out dinners, neither of them moved. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath, and then Kate leaned in. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't perfect. Her hand brushed against his chest, his breath caught somewhere between his ribs, and the kiss landed soft and quiet, like it had been waiting for the storm to pass. There was no dramatic music, no fireworks, just the hum of the rain, the scent of motor oil and lemongrass, and the feeling of something finally falling into place. When they pulled apart, neither spoke right away. Caleb blinked, the flashlight now forgotten in his hand. "Was that part of the redevelopment plan?" he asked, his voice low, amused, maybe a little shaken. Kate smiled, small, real, the kind that settled into her eyes and stayed there. "No, that one kind of snuck up on me." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too." Outside, the rain picked up again, like it had changed its mind about leaving. Inside, they stayed exactly where they were, close enough to feel the warmth still lingering, the air between them charged not by weather, but by something far more dangerous: hope. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday. Kate had spilled coffee on an invoice, Caleb had teased her about her handwriting, and somehow they'd both ended up laughing so hard in the middle of the garage that neither noticed the bell above the door ring. Lacey from the diner had stopped by to drop off pie, blueberry, still warm. She stood near the entrance, phone in hand, smiling as she snapped a photo before either of them could straighten up or remember to care how they looked. Kate, leaning against the counter, her head thrown back in laughter. Caleb, beside her, hand on a wrench, grease on his cheek, eyes lit with something lighter than he'd carried in months. The next morning, the photo was online. Small-town mechanic and his CEO boss, Briar Creek's unlikely power duo, has the whole town talking. It wasn't mean. It wasn't even gossip. It was just everywhere. Within hours, customers started arriving with curious smiles. Someone stuck a printout of the article on the community board next to the cash register. One man asked if they were hiring. Another asked if they were dating. Caleb grunted and kept working. Kate tried to laugh it off. "Apparently we're a headline now." He glanced over at her, eyes narrowed. "You okay with that?" She nodded, though a part of her wasn't sure. "It's just a picture." But it wasn't. It was proof of something real, something unpolished and unexpected, a moment that couldn't be scheduled or managed or spun, and people saw it. Customers who had once hesitated around Kate now greeted her with warmth. A little girl asked if she could be a mechanic, and a boss, just like the lady in the photo. Someone dropped off donuts with a note that read "Power Couple Fuel." Kate didn't confirm or deny anything. Neither did Caleb. But that afternoon, when the lunch rush faded and the garage grew quiet again, he passed her a fresh cup of coffee. No words, just a soft glance. And she smiled, already knowing the whole town was watching. Funny how a single photo could capture something even they hadn't fully named yet. The phone buzzed on Kate's desk just after sunset, long after the last customer had pulled out of the lot and the garage had returned to its usual hush. Caleb was in the back, replacing brake pads on a Chevy that had seen better decades. The radio played softly, old country murmuring through static. Kate glanced at the screen. David Callahan. She didn't move at first, just stared at the name like it belonged to a ghost. Then she picked up the phone and stepped outside, into the cool evening air that smelled of rain-soaked asphalt and distant wood smoke. "David?" she said, voice tight but steady. "Kate." His tone was too smooth, too familiar. "Still dodging the spotlight, I see." She didn't respond. "I'm calling because the board wants you back. They're offering partner this time. Real equity, bigger accounts, a corner office with your name in brass." Kate rubbed her temple. I thought they moved on. They didn't. Not from you. Silence. Come back, he said. You don't belong in some half-dead garage in Nowhereville. You belong in a place where people wear suits, not coveralls. Her jaw clenched. Funny, I've met more honest people in coveralls than I ever did in conference rooms. You're better than this, Kate. I'm different than this, she corrected, softer now. He sighed. Don't make this about pride. It's not, she said. It's about peace. And I didn't have any when I was with you, or with them. She hung up before he could say more. When she walked back inside, her face was unreadable. Caleb looked up from the workbench, catching the faint edge of something in her eyes. Sadness, maybe. Or anger. Or both. Everything okay? He asked casually, like he wasn't already bracing. Kate nodded. Just the past trying to sell me my old life back. He didn't press, just handed her a rag to wipe the grease off a toolbox she hadn't even noticed was dirty. She wiped it anyway, and with every pass of her hand, she felt a little more sure that the life she'd almost gone back to wasn't worth trading for the one she was quietly building here. The days that followed felt quieter, not in sound. Engines still roared, tools still clanked, but in all the spaces in between. Caleb worked like always, but he didn't linger by the office. Kate still showed up on time, but she stopped bringing coffee for 2. She hadn't told him yet. Not in words, but something in the way she triple-checked her calendar, the long phone calls taken just out of earshot, and the stack of folders growing on her desk. It was clear she was weighing her old world against this one. On Thursday, she found him tightening lug nuts on a Ford that rattled every time it blinked. She stood there a moment, watching him work, before she finally said it. I got the offer in writing, she said. New York, partner track. It's everything I wanted. He didn't look up, just kept twisting the wrench. That's great. Sounds like a big deal. She waited. Nothing more came. I haven't said yes yet, she added, a little sharper. Caleb set the wrench down carefully, wiped his hands. You don't owe anyone here an explanation, Kate. Her name again? It hit softer this time, better. I wasn't giving one, she said, barely above a whisper. I was hoping for a reason not to. That made him look at her, and in that glance she saw everything he wasn't saying, the way his jaw clenched, the flicker in his eyes, the way his shoulders refused to sag, even when she knew he wanted to crumble, but he just nodded. Then you should go. You've earned it. And that was that. The next morning she packed up the office in silence, left the keys on the desk. Her car waited just outside the garage door, idling softly. Caleb didn't come out to say goodbye, but as she backed out, she looked through the glass and saw him standing at the far end of the shop, hands in his pockets, staring at the place she used to sit. And even from that distance, something in his eyes pleaded the truth his mouth never would. Please don't go. But she did. It had been a week, 7 full days since she left. The garage ran like it always had, bays full, phones ringing, the same old country songs looping on the same old radio. Caleb showed up early, stayed late, said less. He kept his head down and his hands busy, the way men do when something's broken they can't fix. The office light stayed off. Her coffee cup still sat on the desk, untouched. Most folks didn't mention her. A few asked if she'd be back. Caleb gave the same answer every time. Probably not. Then, on a Monday morning, as the sun finally broke through the stretch of gray that had lingered since she left, he arrived to find the lot blocked by a delivery truck. A sign, long and rectangular, leaned against the flatbed. The driver hopped down, clipboard in hand. You Caleb Reed? Caleb nodded, wary. Got an install order. Says right here, south-facing front, top of the shop. Caleb frowned. What sign? The man just shrugged. Paid in full. Instructions say no photos, no publicity, just install and go. It took 20 minutes. Caleb stood out front, arms folded, watching as the new sign rose into place. Fresh wood, brushed steel letters, clean, sharp edges that somehow still felt like they belonged. Reed and Harper. Auto built on grit, backed by grace. He didn't move, just stared. The town's whispers would come, questions too. But in that moment, all he felt was the air shift, just a little, like something had returned, or maybe had never fully left. He reached up and ran his fingers along the edge of the sign, like touching it would help him understand it better. She hadn't called, hadn't emailed, but this was louder than words. She'd left something behind, or maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done yet. And for the first time in days, Caleb let his shoulders drop. The ache in his chest didn't leave entirely, but the weight of wondering, it started to lift. The bell above the garage door jingled like it always did, but something about it felt different. Caleb didn't look up right away. He was elbow-deep in the undercarriage of an old Civic, hands black with grease, trying to forget what that sound used to mean. Then he heard her voice. "I see you didn't burn the place down while I was gone." His head jerked up. There she was. Kate stood just inside the doorway, a travel bag slung over one shoulder, boots muddy from the gravel, wind-blown hair tucked behind her ears. No clipboard, no grand entrance. Just her. Calm. Collected. Home. Caleb wiped his hand slowly on the rag hanging from his belt. "You're supposed to be in a glass tower somewhere," he said, trying hard to keep his voice from cracking. "I turned them down," she said. He stared, searching her face for the part that might be joking. He didn't find it. "They offered a ridiculous salary," she added, walking closer. "An office the size of this garage, a driver, stock options, all the things I used to think meant something." She stopped in front of him, looking up, eyes soft but steady. "But they couldn't offer me what this place does." Caleb tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. "What's that?" he managed. She smiled. "Meaning. A place that's messy and real, people who show up, one man who thinks with his hands and listens with his silence." He didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence between them cracked wide and warm. So much had happened, and yet nothing needed to be explained. Kate looked around the shop, her gaze landing on the new sign outside the window, her name beside his. A statement in steel. "I figured I owed you an answer," she said. Caleb exhaled, slow and deep. "I already got it." And just like that, the air shifted again, not because something ended, but because something, finally, had begun. By late spring, the garage had found its rhythm again, only now it beat with two hearts instead of one. Caleb still got there first, as he always had. Coffee in hand, doors open by dawn, radio humming the same 3 songs until someone remembered to change the station. But these days, he wasn't the only one reaching for the torque wrench. Kate had stopped wearing heels altogether. Her manicure had surrendered weeks ago, and her blazer now lived permanently in the back office, untouched. Most mornings she was already in coveralls by the time Caleb rolled up the bay doors, hair tied back, smudge of grease on her cheek she never quite remembered to wipe off. She didn't just run the numbers anymore. She ran diagnostics. She crawled under hoods, she swapped out filters, she even got the hang of the old tire machine, though Caleb still teased her every time it squealed too loud. Customers noticed. Locals stopped calling her the new boss and started calling her by name. Some folks came in just to ask if Kate's around, and more than once she ended up explaining engine repairs with her hands covered in oil and her tablet left forgotten in the office. Word had spread, quiet but steady. A garage that fixed more than just cars. A place where people were remembered by name, where the coffee was always hot and the owners actually listened. Folks started driving in from other towns. First it was Marvin's cousin from Easton. Then a woman from Fairview who'd heard the lady mechanic with the no-nonsense face could fix a rattle no one else could. One man drove 50 miles just to get his transmission looked at by the Harper who stayed. The garage didn't look much different. Same walls, same floor, same stubborn patch of oil by Bay 2, But something about it had changed. Or maybe, finally, it had just settled into what it was always meant to be. A place where people came not just to fix what was broken, but to remember what was worth keeping. And for both of them, Caleb and Kate, it finally felt like home. The years passed slowly, then all at once. The garage aged like a well-worn jacket, sturdy, familiar, softened in the right places. The tools were still there, older now, but just as reliable. The same clatter of wrenches, the same hum of the radio, now peppered with the occasional pop song, thanks to the younger mechanics Kate insisted on hiring. But the biggest change wasn't the new lift or the second workbay they finally built out back. It was the laughter. High-pitched, fast, unapologetic. Tiny feet pattered across the concrete floor, weaving between tool carts and tires stacked taller than they were. One boy, dark-haired and wild-eyed, held up a plastic wrench and shouted, "I'm fixing the carburetor!" Though the toy car in front of him didn't even have an engine. His little sister followed close behind, clutching a clipboard she'd stolen from the office, glasses sliding down her nose, pretending to take orders. Caleb sat on a stool sipping coffee that had long since gone cold, watching them with the same quiet smile he wore the day he first taught Kate how to rebuild a carburetor. His hands were slower now, but his heart steady as ever. Kate leaned against the wall beside him, arms folded, her coveralls dusted with flour instead of oil. She'd been helping with cupcakes for the school fundraiser that morning. She nudged him with her elbow. "You gonna tell them that carburetor's just a lunchbox?" He chuckled. "Nah, let 'em believe it runs." On the wall above the entrance, where the old sign once hung crooked and faded, there now stood a new one, crafted from reclaimed wood, letters carved deep and painted bold. Reed and Harper Auto where strangers stalled and love ignited. Customers still came from miles around. But some days, the garage felt less like a business and more like a heartbeat. A place stitched together by timing and grit and 1,000 tiny choices that somehow led to this. Not a fairy tale, not a dream, just a real working machine called family, messy, loud, beautiful, and running smoother than anything they'd ever built with bolts and grease.